The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good day, everyone. Thank you very much for dialing into our webinar. This is Jay Fisk. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Powerhouse Dynamics. We're hosting today's webinar, which is titled, When Crisis Strikes, How Two Retail Facilities Leaders Are Combating the Pandemic. We very much appreciate everyone carving some of your valuable time out to listen to our two subject matter experts that we are fortunate to have from Five Below, retailer Five Below, and from Lush Cosmetics. Just a little bit on the webinar logistics. We're going to try and keep us as efficient as possible. I know time is valuable. I'll try and keep it to 30 minutes, but possibly 40 depending on how many questions there are. We're going to try and make this fairly conversational with our two subject matter experts today, but if you do have a question, please don't be shy. You'll see in the GoToWebinar app control panel, there's a little section entitled Questions. So if you have one, please type it in there. Everyone's line is muted, but I will see your questions and I will do my best to answer them either in real time, if you need more clarification or want some more details and something that one of our two panelists have said. We're happy to elaborate on that. And if I don't get to it right away, I'll try to address it at the end of the session. Today's session is being recorded, so if any of your colleagues did not get the chance to listen in to the guidance from our subject matter experts today, they'll have a chance to do so after the fact. We'll be sending out a follow-up email thanking you for your time and including a link to the recording of the session. So the goal of today's webinar is to share some best practices with how two retail leaders are managing their key equipment like HVAC and lighting and energy in this incredibly challenging time that we are all facing. And as I mentioned, we are quite fortunate to have two thought leaders in their space. Let me introduce them to you. Amy Stelmazik is the Energy Systems Manager for retailer Five Below. They have over 900 locations across the US. As the head of energy for the leading retailer Five Below, Amy Stelmazik is driving the company's sustainability initiatives while at the same time creating operational efficiencies that save time and money. Amy started at Five Below in a facilities role overseeing the HVAC repair and maintenance programs and also oversaw the rollout of their energy management program with SiteGauge across all stores in their chain. We're also joined by Richard Outhwaite, who is the sustainability analyst for Lush Natural Cosmetics. Sustainability analyst Richard is a key member of the team at Lush Cosmetics. They have a goal, or had a goal, of reducing energy consumption by 20% by 2020. And under Richard's leadership, they managed to exceed that goal. So congrats to the Lush team. Richard is also responsible for the energy management program with SiteGauge at Lush. Prior to Lush Cosmetics, Richard developed holistic solutions for green infrastructure and buildings with Web Earth and earned a master's degree in environmental systems engineering from University College London. So thank you again, Amy and Richard, for your time and your contributions to our discussion today. So just briefly about Powerhouse Dynamics, we're a technology firm based in Boston, and we are the makers of the SiteGauge equipment and energy management system. We're in 5,000 customer locations and growing. We focus on retail chains, restaurant chains, convenience stores, and other large multi-site operators. We leverage the Internet of Things or IoT technology to connect, analyze, and control equipment for the smart enterprise. So with that, I want to open it up to our panelists and really kind of have a conversation structured around 5 different general areas. Cost controls during these times, any kinds of low cost or high value initiatives or no cost initiatives that they can take, how they're engaging with service providers, in particular those that are managing HVAC equipment, how the conversation around sustainability and energy is being viewed today as an economic solution in this new normal that we seem to be facing and working, struggling with today collectively. And along those lines, what does the new normal look like? So that's really the general structure of today's conversation. So with that, let me open it up and just do a quick check-in to say, Amy, let's start with you. Because what is the current status with the Five Below enterprise?
We are currently opening stores as we are able to, according to local guidelines, obviously staying in compliance with, whatever the local ordinance is, and staying closed where we need to. But we're just trying to keep an eye on exactly what is open and what is closed so that we're not keeping any kind of systems running in a store that is not allowed to be open. It's obviously one of the easier ways to capture a few extra dollars in the time of being closed is to not be running systems unnecessarily. So, we're just kind of taking it day by day to see who's allowed to open when.
Yeah, and this is starting to emerge now. We're watching the news about things in Georgia. For the listeners, are there any other areas that we're hearing signs of in the news that they may be discussing also gradual ways of opening up parts of their economy again? So I know Georgia has been kind of in the lead initially here and talking about it's beginning to open up some parts of businesses there. But that's what I've seen primarily in the news. And so, Richard, let me shift to you then also. How are things? Can you give a quick snapshot of what is the status right now of all the Lush cosmetic stores across North America? I know you have Canadian operations, you've got U.S. operations. Can you give us a quick snapshot or status?
Yes, so currently all of our retail stores are remaining closed until obviously we hear otherwise. But we've been lucky that our digital business has kind of kept us going. So the distribution teams are working hard to get those orders out safely. Obviously with reduced staffing and social distancing going on in those buildings that are still operational. And yeah, they're looking to see how what it looks like when we do reopen. Whether that's reduced opening hours with a pickup in store. A challenge for us at the minute, and I guess for a lot of people retailing online is the delivery times are obviously longer than normal. If we could have a kind of a pickup in store where they picked it up at the desk or something, that's an option. But at the minute, we're keeping our ears open and until we get some more direction on that.
Are you seeing, Richard, a difference between your Canadian locations and the ones in the States? Are there differences in terms of the rules or any kind of guidance the local governments are providing to you?
Yeah, the US definitely seems to be a little bit more bullish on when they'll reopen. So those are the stores where we're hearing the those first sounds of things. Maybe getting back to a slightly more normal situation. Canada, it seems they're playing it a little bit more safe. So most of that chatter is for stores in the US at the minute. Canada's playing it safe.
Yeah, interesting. So let's get into some of these topics. Obviously, this pandemic hit unprecedented for all of us. It's especially hard hitting in food service and retail. So this came on so quickly. Amy, can you talk a little bit about what you at Five Below did? What were some of the things you did when you understood that you needed to temporarily shutter your in-store retail operations, just to kind of control the costs?
Sure. I can obviously only speak from an energy standpoint, but our major goal, as soon as we knew that stores were going to be closed for more than just a short amount of time, was to just make sure that we were changing set points and turning off the lights that we are able to control within the store. The initial guidance that we were keeping an eye on was more local because of where we are in the Northeast, and it quickly expanded to the entire country. So, you know, just trying to control things initially. And once we understood a couple days in that this was going to be a little more long-term than just a few days of being closed, we were able to make a little bit more of an educated decision of what those set points needed to be according to the local areas, and keeping things closed in that regard.
Yeah, and I know because we get this question a lot. Actually, people say, "Hey, what are you recommending for off-hour set points?" So can you share? Just curious, where do you set your retail stores when they're unoccupied?
Sure. Our set points are 80 degrees for cooling and 60 degrees for heating for the off hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you will see, just given the time of year that happened, it led to most of the stores staying in idle for the bulk of the time that they've been closed, with the exception of, you know, some of the very, very warm climates in the South. But that's the guidance we follow.
I guess there's one bit of well, I know you call it silver lining, right? But at least it's happening in a shoulder season where your HVAC units aren't working terribly hard anyway. So putting the setbacks has allowed them to mostly be in idle. Then is that what you're saying?
Right. We didn't go for completely turning them off, but due to just the time of year it is for a lot of stores, it led to the units just not needing to run at all.
And are you, in terms of giving any kind of staff flexibility, I don't know if any staff is ever on site during these, during these days. Are there things happening with inventory? So is there also an override policy? Like, how much discretion are you giving over set points if someone does need to be in the store and they want to adjust the temperature for whatever it is they need to do, whether it's inventory or something, or working on some piece of equipment?
We do allow the stores to override. They have a 5-degree override that will last for a 2-hour time period. We did ask that if anybody was going to be on site for whatever the reason is, that they reach out to us first, so we're aware and we can, make it a little easier in whatever set point and getting ahead of that, instead of needing for them to just constantly be overriding if they were going to be there for more than a very short amount of time.
Gotcha. And Richard, on your side, actually, Amy, I forgot to ask, what about lighting and lighting schedules? What are you doing with regard to that?
When our stores were closing up initially, we sent some instructions to the store managers asking them to turn off the lights that they control locally within the stores, and we, from the site stage controls, were able to turn off the other portion of the lights so that there was not lighting on in the store during the closed periods.
So you're still giving some amount. It's like, again, if someone needs to be there on site for whatever reason while the store is closed, you're giving some discretion over the lighting controls, enough so they can do, again, equipment service or inventory or what have you.
Yes, if they are on site, they're able to override the lights, and they can control some of the lights from the store themselves. And again, if they were going to be there for more than a very short amount of time, we just asked them to reach out to us so that we could assist in getting things up and running for them. Yeah, gotcha. And Richard, how about on the Lush Cosmetics side, things that you've done from an equipment or energy perspective to try and control costs while stores are shuttered?
Yeah, well, the key one for us has been our HVAC usage. Our temperature set point for the off period, we have to keep slightly higher on the cooling side, because the product needs to be kept at 78 or below. So we just a couple of degrees under at 78. But as you mentioned, when only seeing stores, our kind of Texas and Florida stores, which are really getting anywhere near where it'll be kicking in. One of the things about our stores is we do have to have a fairly large exhaust system for a relatively small space, which obviously puts extra demand on the HVAC system. So, being able to make sure that's turned off while the malls are closed has been a real win for us. Because otherwise, it really, I think we're bringing in a lot of in the winters, it's not too much, but again, for those stores with warmer climates, bringing in hot, humid air isn't great for the product. So being able to have that flexibility to keep that off improves our product quality, as well as saving energy and keeping costs down.
Yeah, and I know for those who may not be aware, Lush Cosmetics has a number. Well, all of your products are naturally derived, but some require. I guess there's even some products that require refrigeration.
Yeah, so
perhaps.
Yeah, I was going to say we've moved towards packaging-free products as well over the past few years. I think about 65% of our products now are solid versions of themselves. So whatever it is, whether it's a moisturizer or conditioner bar, whatever it is, and those are a little bit more susceptible to changes in environmental conditions. So having that flexibility to maintain it at least helps us having to write off a lot of stock as soon as we turn off aircon. Not having to make the choice between stock or energy.
Yeah, and what about refrigeration, Richard? Any thoughts on that? I mean, those obviously need to keep running. Have you migrated inventory out of refrigeration in retail stores to some other larger facility, or is it staying put there?
So the stuff we keep here, the fresh face masks that we do refrigerate, they only ever really hold a small amount of stock. So those products which they've been that have a limited shelf life or that they've got a large amount of, they've been donating those. So they've been giving them to a number of shelters and like charitable organizations to give those soaps and products out to the public.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So some generosity in there as well. That's very helpful. Thank you. So along those lines, then, so you've taken some measures to try and control costs as much as you can with energy and with HVAC, with lighting. With the stores closed, Amy, are there any things that you're looking at or have done that be either a no cost or low cost initiative you can take during this period to kind of get you ready for once the stores begin to reopen and maybe you're in a bit of a stronger position? Anything along those lines you can talk about?
Sure. We are kind of still looking at everything to see what we're able to do. Obviously, as we've mentioned a couple times, the most obvious is to just turn our set points way down, shut off the lights that we're able to if a store is not being occupied. We've definitely looked in a couple different options of turning on fans to keep some air circulating so that we're not creating further maintenance issues down the line, whether it be with the unit itself or in high humidity areas. We certainly have to keep an eye around the Gulf of Mexico and some of those areas that are prone to mold growth. So right now, our major concern is to reduce the utility spends, but also not at a cost of further repairs or potential damage that could happen down the line.
It's almost like if you have a car that you're not using, maybe fire it up every once in a while just to make sure the battery is topped off, or sort of the equivalent with your rooftop units.
Right. We're just making sure that if it is in an area that is still closed and not able to be used, that we're not going to do further damage to the unit or store.
And Richard, and how about on your side? Any kinds of no cost or low cost initiatives that you're either looking to take or are taking to put yourselves in a bit of a stronger position coming out of this?
Well, I think we talked about the kind of being able to maintain product quality and kind of minimize losses there while we're not able to sell. So that's obviously a big win. for us as well. Something we are also looking at, while we do have this downtime, is whether we're able, with the information we've got from the system, and we obviously have a lot of diagnostic about, which units may be due for repair, and like normally most retailers, when we have repairs done on the system, we're looking at doing stuff in the nighttime, which is an added cost. Now, if we have the flexibility to do stuff while the stores are closed, then that's a particular opportunity for us as well.
So you're saying now that the store is temporarily shuttered, you can do some work during the daytime that was ordinarily at nighttime with your maintenance providers?
Yeah, I mean, the maintenance aspect of it for us has been a big win traditionally. Which leads us on to the next one, I suppose. We've definitely seen wins with our maintenance team, either scheduling or kind of forecasting equipment that'll need repairs, even stuff which is not. We monitor the HVAC systems in the store, but we've seen just from the energy monitoring and metering side of things, we've seen cases where they've been able to use that information to say, we have a lot of hot water tanks in the store for doing product demos, for example, and they're able to check whether it's still drawing power and how it's been operating over the last few weeks when there's been reported problems in the store, to diagnose whether it's a problem with the piece of the kit or with our plumbing system, for example.
Yeah, interesting. So taking advantage of the shuttered store to perhaps update or repair some equipment that might be a little more disruptive to operations ordinarily. I know, Amy, in discussing this webinar, you had made some comments also about tagging systems. Can you provide some more color on some of the actions you did when you found rooftop units, for example, that were not performing well? Kind of talk about some of the things that you did, and then I want to really understand, coming out of this, when you flag these things, how do you strategize for beginning to address them kind of system by system, so you're not overwhelming service providers, and certainly so you're not overwhelming your budget for repairs and maintenance? So can you talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing, Amy, please?
Sure. So once we did change the set points and kind of essentially shut things down at all of the stores, we were keeping an eye on particular stores and specific units that were consuming a lot of energy, even though they were in idle, which is something that we typically ask our service providers to look at around preventative maintenance. But given that the stores were closed, we decided this was a good opportunity to do so. So we found some opportunities with some units that looked like they were running very high energy usage when the units weren't running, and we were able to just turn them off, especially if it was in an area of the country we didn't feel concerned about the potential of keeping the unit off. For example, areas that are not reaching the max set point regardless. So that was definitely something that we kept an eye on. And of course made a list of those units, so ultimately when the stores are able to reopen, that we have those looked at, whether it's on a service call or a preventative maintenance visit. We are keeping an eye on the problem units, and as to not overwhelm our service providers and our repairs and maintenance, we're kind of just looking at it state by state, because the states are opening at different times. We have the opportunity to kind of look at a smaller scale. For example, you mentioned a couple states that are starting to open right now, while much of the Northeast is going to remain closed for at least another couple of weeks. We have the opportunity to not completely overwhelm our service providers and budget in that regard, because we're only looking at a small subset of our stores. So we are we're kind of just following as the stores open, and as we always do, with any kind of service call, making sure we have the priority right. If this is an urgent repair, we just need to go ahead and get it done. If it's something that looks like it might be able to wait for the next preventative maintenance, we're still following, you know, those guidelines that we would follow at a time that we're not in a pandemic.
Yeah. And are you continuing to pursue your regularly scheduled PM program while the stores are shuttered, or are those also on hold until the stores reopen?
They have been temporarily paused just because they would be scheduled to start in a time when a lot of stores are likely still going to be closed. So there's still a conversation surrounding exactly what that's going to look like. If it's to maybe get started on some stores that are open, if it's to have some service technicians complete the repair and maintenance check or the preventative maintenance checklist while they were on site for a repair, if one is necessary, is also something being looked at. There's a couple different scenarios, and I don't know that we have an exact schedule or timeline in place right now.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about sustainability. I know it's, you know, a lot of brands have sustainability programs, which is terrific. I'm wondering, Richard, as the leader of sustainability for Lush, does the pandemic and the shuttering, does it put sustainability or energy initiatives around cost into a new light? And if so, you know, how might that perspective have changed, or how do you think it may change?
Well, I think that, you know, the value of these kind of systems, you know, obviously, you know, we're lucky to have, you know, a strong buy-in for all of these kind of initiatives. But, you know, as any business, you're competing with, you know, when you're talking about large capital projects with the rest of the business's needs. And I think the benefit of having that flexibility, you know, and resilience within the stores to be able to shut it down and really minimize any impact at the press of a button has never really been appreciated before, I don't think. You know, obviously everyone sees the energy savings and the dollars and cents, and you know, like I said, this was one of our key strategies to hit those energy saving targets. But you know, when it's kind of really difficult times, I think that the value of these really becomes apparent, and the ease at which we can adjust our, you know, one of our you know, store expenses to those changing conditions has been really valuable. So I think going forwards, it'll definitely, you know, at some point, it'll definitely be beneficial for us to get other things off the table, which come in the same light.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll never have to go through this again. But Amy, same question to you in terms of sustainability and various energy initiatives, whether it's putting in energy management or relamping or any of the other things that you can do in these multi-site environments. You know, any thoughts on is there a different perspective now with leadership on sustainability in light of what we're all struggling through today? Sorry, Amy, I don't think I heard you.
Oh, sorry, I think I lost you guys for a second.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess mostly agreed with kind of everything Richard just said. It's definitely been a topic of conversation that the energy management system and what a useful tool it is to be able to kind of turn things off at the drop of a hat, and some other conversations have kind of sprouted up. Well, you know, we obviously hope we never are in this kind of situation again. We almost annually have to deal with some stores closing up shop for hurricanes or kind of other natural weather events. And, you know, I think this has really highlighted how much control we have to shut off the major components that are going to use electricity in our stores, and how we're able to do that not only on a store by store basis, state by state. We have a lot of flexibility to be able to control these things. And, you know, while we might never, hopefully never be shut down for a month period, we certainly do have some situations in which we need to close up stores for a shorter amount of time. And, you know, this really highlights how easy it is for us to be able to do these things and shut things off and amend schedules and make sure that we're not running systems more than they need to be, given whatever the circumstances.
Yeah, sure. Helpful, thank you. So I guess that I promised 30 minutes. We're just a little bit beyond 30 minutes. But to wrap things up, Amy, let's start with you. What, just generally speaking, any other kinds of recommendations you may have for, we've got a lot of folks on the line today that have similar responsibilities around facilities, around equipment, around energy, some sustainability folks. Any other thoughts about things that you've learned going through this process that you want to share, and you know, other best practices?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is kind of just preparing for a little bit more flexibility in whatever the nature of your job is. Obviously, we've all had to kind of acclimate to a new normal the past couple weeks, but specifically in the realm of energy and looking at energy management systems and our facilities team and our facilities management platform, and just how we need to be able to very quickly rearrange things given whatever kind of crazy circumstance. So I think visibility into, you know, how some of these systems operate and how we can really quickly amend schedules, not only from an energy standpoint, but facilities as well, is going to be very important going into kind of whatever our new normal is.
Yeah, thank you. And Richard, on your side, advice to your peers in the industry?
Yeah, I think, you know, echoing the same kind of sentiments. You know, one thing that's been really useful for us, obviously, is all the monitoring and metering. So again, seeing how our store's energy consumption profile changes. If this extends, you know, maybe we are in a kind of reduced operational hours or capacity for a longer period of time, seeing, you know, how that affects our the energy consumption breakdown in the stores. You know, we already got a lot of insight the first, you know, when we did the initial rollout of the system. But again, looking back at that, once we've been in this pattern, maybe it'll inform us, you know, what we need to be focused on next. You know, as the way we use our stores changes, you know.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate the perspectives and the guidance, Amy, from you, and Richard, from you as well. Again, we're just a little bit over the 30 minutes that I had promised, but if I can just briefly, I think, try to summarize what we've heard today, a number of different pieces of advice. You know, controlling energy, helping to maintain equipment in stores during this challenging period. You know, have setbacks. 5 below, it's 80 degrees for cooling and 60 for heating. At Lush, there's a little more sensitivity to the products and the natural cosmetics, so they a little bit tighter band at 78 for cooling and 60 for heating. You know, turn off whatever you can without adversely affecting product, without adversely affecting equipment. Amy mentioned keeping the fans circulating some, perhaps in areas that require a bit more circulation for humidity and preventing mold from growing. Again, trying to protect those assets in the stores. Maybe the occasional turn on of equipment, especially during a shoulder season where when you set them back, they really don't run much, if at all. But do ways to not only think just about energy, but also, again, protecting the investments you've got in the facilities and possibly product as well. Taking this time to tag units that may require repair, whether if you can get to them now, like it sounds like Richard and team are able to for some pieces of equipment, maybe take advantage of the suddenly available equipment and address them now. Otherwise, tag them, put a pin in them, and maybe identify them as something that should get addressed when the store comes back open and there's time for a PM job that can be expanded a bit more to just do more than just swap out the filter, for example. So, look for those maintenance opportunities while the stores are shuttered, and then come up with a prioritized way to address them when things begin turning back on, so you're not overwhelming your techs, and you're certainly, needing to control your budget. And then I think the last thought was flexibility. Prepare for flexibility. Certainly, like I said, I really hope and pray we never have to go through something like this again. But there are weather events, right? And so there's extreme cold, snowstorms, hurricanes, etc. Think about measures you could take going forward. So the next time we've got to be agile and close things down temporarily, and then of course on the flip side, bring them back up as quickly as possible to get things rolling again. That is helpful. So with that, I'm going to draw this to a close. I very much appreciate Emil Stamazik and Richard Althwaite. Thank you very much to the two of you for sharing your expertise and your advice. This will be recorded again if people want to listen to it or their colleagues want to listen to it at a later time. They will be able to do so. Thank you to everyone who logged in and listened to our webinar today. We very much appreciate your time. Certainly, if you have any questions or want to reach out to us about SiteStage or the things that we're doing around energy and equipment management, our contact info is here on the screen. With that, I wish everyone a great day.